Hello, I'm Ciarán Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. In this episode we catch up with County Leitrim native John O'Connell, who runs a mixed sheep and contract rearing heifer system in Ballinamore. John, who's also a participant in the Better Farm programme, discusses his scanning results with us and subsequent management of the ewe flock. We discuss the role of high quality silage in the system and the ration spec he's using this year. John puts great emphasis on ensuring sufficient quality and quantity of colostrum and lamb, as a key part of his system. He takes us through the feeding regime, in particular how he manages singles for cross fostering. We move on to discuss the management of pregnant ewe lambs in his flock. We finish up discussing how these and triplet rearing ewes are managed post lambing. We start off, however, with John discussing the importance of ewe condition right through from tipping through mid-pregnancy and how he tries to maintain this with his ewe flock.
Yeah, well, I suppose before, if I was to go back to tipping or a little bit before it, the ewes would have been looked after very well pre-tipping. And so the week leading up to tipping, I would go in again and do a final call. I call very hard, and if there's a few ewes that didn't respond to copious amounts of grass, we'd say they're pulled off before they're joined with the ram. And then usually the ewes, when they go with the ram, then they're able to hold the condition then, because they've been building them up for the weeks and months previous to tipping.
It just leaves management a wee bit easier, and certainly it improves output of the flock.
Oh, without a doubt, over the years I've noticed that that work that's done pre-tipping pays dividends later on in the year, right through the winter and right up until lambing, and even during lambing, post lambing even.
Look, John, it's been a very wet back in most parts of the country, and certainly it's no different in County Leitrim, so it's not. You housed a little bit earlier this year than planned, probably.
I did, Ciarán. I had no choice in the matter. There was a few reasons. Grass availability just wasn't there. Utilisation of grass wasn't as good because of the fact that it was so wet. And I didn't want condition to slip on ewes. I was watching them carefully. I would have had them in, say, a few weeks prior to housing for a fluke dose, and they were in good order, and I was watching them carefully, didn't want condition to slip, and for that reason I usually housed the first week in January. This year I housed 2/3 of them on the 12th of December, and the last of the ewes went in on the 24th of December, Christmas Eve.
It's important, like your point there, we're holding that condition, just utilisation really wasn't in it this December. No,
I could see it myself there. The quality of the grass, the grass was there, right, but they just couldn't utilise it, and because of that, that was the main reason for me taking the decision to house that bit earlier. And once you get them in, you can really notice them. If you have good quality silage and that, you can really notice them even lifting and picking up in the week after they're housed even.
Just speaking of silage, John, like obviously it's going to take a wee bit more forage for the winter, but because they were housed earlier, the type of silage you're feeding, John, over the last couple of years, you put a fair effort into making quality silage most years. What have you available to you this year?
I do, Ciarán. I make a good effort. I try to make good quality silage every year to have that good stuff for the sheep. The silage this year ranges from 73 to 75 plus DMD silage. It's nice leafy silage, and it's very palatable. Very clean silage. There's no soil in it. They're well preserved bales, and the sheep are doing very well on them up until now. They've really held the condition, and in fact, I suppose they've even improved in condition, because I would have been handled them a few times since they were housed. So I'm very happy with the silage. Most of the silage that's made is taken off surplus paddocks. So basically, during the year, when paddocks will get too strong, rather than grazing those paddocks, I just skip those paddocks and take out this, what I would call rocket fuel silage, 3 to 4 bales per acre, and have that good quality silage then for the winter months.
It's one way of guaranteeing feed quality. Look, maybe if I fast forward, maybe the more current management, the good condition the back end, that I'm assuming carried through to a good scan this year. You've scanned a couple of weeks back.
Yeah, I was happy enough with the scan. I was very happy with the scan. I scanned on the 6th of January. The main flock of ewes scanned at 1.97, a litre size of 2.06. and a nice scan this year in particular, because I ended up with more twins and less triplets. So it was a nicer scan for looking going forward at lambing time. There'll be hopefully a little bit less work with cross fostering and that sort of thing, because it's a nicer type of a scan.
Very few empties in that as well, John.
Very few empties, yeah. There was only 8 empties, and actually this year in particular, with the price of dry ewes, I turned them into cash. I sold them off the following week. They're a great trade at the moment, them dry ewes.
Just right, there's a lot of multiples in that, so there is managing them at the moment. Right, they're on. I'm assuming there's 73, 75 DMD silage. Whenever you start introducing concentrate.
So the triplets and quads, there's a few quad ewes in that. There was 5 ewes scanned with quads, and the quads and the triplets are kind of managed a little bit different to the rest of the flock with regard to concentrate feeding. So I would have introduced concentrates to them, even though the silage is very good. I introduced them to concentrates 2 weeks ago. One thing I suppose I forgot to mention earlier was the day that the ewes are scanned, they're separated into pens according to their scan, according to the body condition score, and according to their raddle colour. So it makes it life an awful lot easier for management and feeding those ewes in the weeks leading up to lambing, and obviously at lambing time as well. So the quads and the triplets, Ciarán, would have been introduced to concentrate about a week to 10 days ago. Started them off on around 0.3 to 0.4 of a kilo. And once I go over 0.5 of a kilo, I'll be splitting that in 2 feeds with a minimum of 8 to 10 hours between each feed.
Twins, John, are they started on it yet with you?
So the twins, twin bearing ewes, I started on concentrate only today. I started them on concentrate today. So we're still 5 weeks. I start lambing down around the 10th of March. It'll be fairly compact lambing. So I introduced concentrate to the twin bearing ewes today. And only today I actually had them out for a routine foot bath. And when I had them out for a foot bath, I always like to handle the ewes and see how the condition is. And I'm very happy with how they're holding their condition overall. There may have been 1 or 2 thin ewes, and that's something I do at scanning. I regroup. So the ewes that are thin, if I had 2 or 3 ewes that were a little bit light in condition, they would be put in with the triplet ewes. So they'd be getting that little bit of extra feed and a little bit sooner. The same way as if I had a ewe that was only carrying a single, she'd be put in with the twin bearing ewes. And it seems to work well. It seems to just give her a chance to get that extra bit of condition on. But there was very little of that this year.
John, your singles, there's a slightly different feeding regime for your singles in the flock. Although admittedly this year there might be that many of them in it, but...
Yeah, so a small number, there wouldn't be a big number of singles, but I'd always like to think to be enough singles to match the triplets for cross fostering. It doesn't always happen like that, but this year, thankfully, there is. And hopefully a good few of them will head off to the field with 2 lambs. So for that reason, I try to make sure that the ewe, even though she's only carrying a single lamb, that when she lambs down, she'll have enough milk for 2 lambs. So what I started doing a few years ago, I don't introduce meal or concentrate to the single bearing ewes until about 2 weeks out from lambing. And the main reason why I introduce meal to them then is they don't really need the concentrate in that they're well fit to have a viable lamb with little or no concentrate. But what I do is I sneak in an extra 100 grams of soya into the ration. So I'm giving them maybe 0.3 or 0.4 of a kilo per day, 2 weeks prior to lambing, plus the 100 grams of soya. And what I feel it has done, means that they lamb down a viable, good-sized lamb, but not too big, and still they have enough milk, they have an udder of milk to feed 2 lambs, which is ideal and very beneficial for me, because I like to try and cross-foster or wet foster a triplet lamb onto that ewe. So that's the main reason why they get the extra 100 grams of soya.
If we go back to the basics of where you start with your feeding, that high-quality silage, even how you manage that has an effect on it too. Like they're always on near 75 DMD silage most years, but just like in terms of removing refusals and that, John, how often do you do that?
Well, I suppose I maybe do it a little bit more often than you probably need to, but I would do it every 24 to 48 hours max. I would sweep out whatever's left behind them. Now, the silage they've been on in the last number of weeks has been very, very leafy, very palatable silage, and there's been very little refusals. There's very little to take away from them, but I'd still be inclined to sweep it out. A maximum of 48 hours would be left there, and I'd sweep out and put fresh bales in front of them. So they wouldn't be forced to eat out the last of that silage, because like I suppose sheep are very selective eaters anyway, but I wouldn't force them to eat out the last of that. I give it to maybe some cattle or whatever. It'll still be very palatable, but I wouldn't force the sheep to eat it.
Just in terms of the ration you're using, John, you might just take us through the kind of spec of it this year.
Yeah, the ration I've been using, Ciarán, for the last number of years, it works very well for me. I haven't changed it because it ticks all the boxes. So basically, it's a barley, maize, soya ration. They're the main ingredients in it. It's a 20% crude protein ration. And that part, I suppose, I've learned over the years is important because of the fact that protein is all about milk. And I find that if I have that protein in the ration, rule of thumb is if a ewe is carrying twins, I try to have her in the 2 to 3 weeks prior to lambing, have her up to around 0.9 to a kilo of concentrate. A 20% ration means that she should have enough milk and colostrum, which is very important. I find to have that colostrum there for our 2 strong lambs when they're dropped. So that's why I like to use that ration. It works very well, Ciarán, in that the ewes never seem to get a stomach upset, never seem to go off their feed, especially when I go on to twice a day feed, and I try to keep that feed split a minimum of 8 to 10 hours apart, so as to don't go off their feed, because the last thing we want at lambing time is ewes going down or going off their feed, and I find this ration really ticks all the boxes for me. So I've been using that for the last 4 or 5, maybe 6 years, and it works very well.
And obviously, look, it's the one time a year where that investment really pays off. As you indicated, it's the last thing you want is weak lambs and no colostrum and ewe in the middle of lambing.
Yeah, that's a nightmare scenario, these weak lambs and the amount of time that's spent with them, and it's the busiest time of the year. You really don't have the time or the energy, to spend with them. And it just makes life an awful lot more difficult if you haven't got. So I suppose that to have the plan in place and to have the work done in the weeks leading up to it, it pays dividends big time when lambing kicks in, and you have that colostrum there. There's no substitute for your colostrum, and it's so important that the lamb gets enough of that. And I try to make a special effort at lambing time to make sure that every lamb gets enough colostrum for them first few hours, them crucial hours when they're born.
Get them off to the right side. John, I want to bring you back on 2 points that you mentioned a few times. Handling for condition, you do it as scanning, you're fluke dosing, you handle them. Obviously this year the ewes are in good condition. You're not going to have as many tin ones going in, and you took the steps to minimise the loss during the winter. But in a typical year, how often do you handle them, and what do you do with them thinner ones as you go through it? Because it's not half, they can come in good condition, but some, for various reasons, will lose a little during the housing period.
Yeah, so one thing I do is I routinely foot bath. So if the ewes are coming up to the handling unit for anything at all, let it be their booster vaccine, their clostridial vaccine now coming up in a few weeks' time, I'll automatically let them walk through the foot bath. They were up in the yard today. I brought them up for a routine foot bath. If I'm taking the ewes out of the shed for any reason at all, I'll foot bath them. And when I'm putting them down the race, I'm inclined to handle the ewes. A lot of them, I know are in pretty good condition, but if I'm anywhere concerned about a ewe, or if I'm not happy with her condition, I'll regroup them into a different pen or give them a little bit of special treatment. And there may be an issue. A ewe may have a sore foot, that might be the reason why. So I might take them off, segregate them for that reason. Or there could be a few different reasons, but I'd pull them off and give them preferential treatment, or as I said earlier, regroup them with, as I said, a twin bearing ewe, maybe put her in with the triplets and the quads, give her a little bit of extra concentrate. And if a ewe isn't responding to this preferential treatment, they'll be noted and they won't be kept next year. And they may even, sometimes what I even do is I may even decide to let them ewes off prior to lambing, but it'll be very, very few. There may be 1 or 2 and some years none,
So I suppose really, John, you're dealing with them a quieter time of the year before you get really busy. You're trying to get them right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just one other one to you, like you mentioned there about rattling and split them up on it. Practically, how has that worked for you this year?
It works well. A little bit of work, obviously. This is at tipping time in that change in the rattle colour. So what I usually do is The rams are turned out with the ewes on the 17th of October, lambing down on the 10th of March. And all the rams will be rattled with a yellow paste. And basically, I monitor how the tipping is going. There's a lot of advantages to it, but it'll tell me whether the rams are working, number one. And it'll tell me how many ewes are tipped in the first week or 10 days. So this year, for instance, 85% of them were tipped after 8 days. So I decided to change the rattle colour at that stage. So I changed to a darker colour then. You usually go from light to dark. So I went to a green after 8 days. And at 17 days, I changed the green to red. And there was very little activity with the green and even less activity with red. So one big advantage at tipping time is it shows that there's very few repeats, and it shows that the rams have been working, which is very important, I find. And then another big advantage is when the ewes are housed and after scanning, I can not only segregate and separate the ewes according to the scan, but I can separate the ewes according to the rattle colour. So really what I'm looking at for the first 10 days, 8 to 10 days, I'm focusing on all the ewes that are rattled in yellow. And then I can move on to, so it makes it a little bit easier, the workload at lambing time when you're shepherding the sheep and going through the sheds. You're really only focusing on concentrating on watching the ewes that are rattled in whatever specific colour for that week or that 10 days.
You're going to have a very busy start with this year, John. And just look, speaking of busy start, you made a proportion of your lambs to bring up the numbers every year. How are you managing them? How are you managing them at the moment, or how did it scan for you?
So they scanned pretty well. I was happy enough with the scan. They scanned at 1.23, which I'm pretty happy with for ewe lambs. There was a small percentage of them that were barren, didn't scan. No big deal there. I'll run them on as hoggets for next year, or sometimes I sell them off as butcher lambs. This year I'm going to let them run on for hoggets for next year. So the ewe lambs, one thing that I've learned over the years, I try to make sure that there are at least 60% of the mature weight going to the ram. And that in itself helps for them tipping, in that there's a better chance if they're at least 60% or 65 or 70%. A good strong ewe lamb has a good chance of tipping, and you have a more compact, when the rams go in with them, you'll have a more compact tipping than if they're below par, we'll say. So
you're pushing for about 50 kilos at Jane and John then.
Yeah, this year they were great. They were very strong lambs going to the ram. I was very happy with them. There was lambs up on 58 kilos going to the ram, so I was very happy. And I weighed them actually recently just for the fun of it. They were up on the yard, and I weighed them, and there's some lambs in it there now 65 kilos. So they're great strong lambs. Should be no problem to them to lamb down and look after a lamb or two. So with regard to managing them at the moment, they would have been penned after scanning just as one group, twins and singles all together. And I introduced the concentrate to them the same time as it seems to have worked well for me the last number of years. I introduced concentrate to them the same time as I introduced it to the triplet and quad bearing ewes. And whenever I introduce meal to the twin bearing ewes, which as it happens is today, I separate the ewe lambs then at that stage. I separate the twins from the singles, or if there's any triplets. Thankfully, this year there's no triplets in it. And I separate the twins and the singles. So the singles will continue on 0.4 of a kilo of concentrate up until lambing. I won't be introducing an extra 100 grams of soya to them, the same as I do with the mature ewes. I just let them rear the one lamb when they lamb down. But the twin bearing ewes, I will up the concentrate with them as they get closer to lambing. And it means that they're not only a good strong ewe lamb lambing down, but they have that milk, and they should be able to feed two lambs when they lamb down.
John, just in terms of managing them ewe lambs after lambing, I assume you're going to keep them as a separate group.
After lambing, Ciarán, as it happens, I try to manage the ewe lambs and any triplet ewes that I end up having to put, because I have so many triplets and because they're fairly prolific ewes. There are sometimes a small percentage of ewes that will end up going to the field rearing three lambs. So they will be grouped with the ewe lambs. And ewe lambs, regardless of whether they have a single or a twin, rearing singles or twin lambs, they're all grouped together and they're run as one separate group. So one thing I suppose I would do different with them compared to the main flock is that I'd introduce creep to those lambs more or less from the day they're born, and they have creep with them right through. And plus the fact the ewe lamb, because she's still growing, she would be getting concentrate at grass for the first 2 to 3 weeks, and then I pull the concentrate
just to get her off to a good start.
Yeah. Because of the fact, I suppose, they're still growing. Like I know that's a men that farmers out there that would decide not to breed ewe lambs, but because I do breed them, I try to give them that little bit of preferential treatment,
Then
it stands to them. It pays dividends in the long run. Otherwise, you won't have that ewe lamb as a hog at the following year.
You won't have her certainly in as good a condition anyway. I suppose the other thing there, you bulk out that group, put them triplet round ewes on the other problem cases.
With regard to management of them, Ciarán, I suppose I try to, as I said before, wet foster or take one lamb and foster them onto my single ewes. I sometimes might end up with a small percentage of lambs reared artificially, and then what I do try is to put a small number of them ewes that I'm happy enough with. They will go to the field with triplets or with 3 lambs, but they'll be monitored very closely until I'm happy enough that they're doing a good job with them.
It gives you a separate management group.
Yeah.
John, as always, good catching up with you, so it is. We'll try and get back to you later on in the year. Thanks very much for your time coming on with us.
No problem, Ciarán. No problem.
Okay, we'll wrap things up at this point. Again, as John highlighted, the importance of getting feeding right in this stage of pregnancy, managing condition right the way through, is critical to all sheep systems, particularly for John. He puts huge emphasis on getting the basics right. You can find out more about John's farm under the Better Farm section on the sheep page on the Teagasc website. There's more descriptive detail, and there's no more videos up on our YouTube channel as well from a system during the year gone by. That's it for me for this episode. Again, for any updates from our sheep program, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Ciarán Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and listen back to any of our episodes.